The US is preparing for war, not in the deserts of Iraq, not in the jungles of Vietnam. They are preparing for warfare in heavily populated megacities around the world. The ultimate goal, of course, would be to bring the military onto the streets of the US in response to an external threat, declare martial law, and restrict the citizens. The military-industrial complex's ruthless engagement will escalate. You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. Today we are going to look into this U.S. preparation for war, a new type of war. We're going to begin showing you this image here. It's actually from an article written by a military personnel. And it's an image showing you those preparations, what they do, their training. This happens to be this unit here conducting a civil disturbance training in preparation as a domestic quick reaction force. So basically a riot breaks out, protests break out, the military can come onto the streets and they can restore order. What worries me about this is that the military is generally reserved for fighting in foreign countries. They are trained to kill. They are trained to be warriors. They are highly skilled individuals that have a specific purpose against a foreign country. But here, they have preparations, and they have been making preparations to even fight within the borders of their own country. And things get a little tough. You get an individual who's done several tours, 3, 4, 5 tours and beyond, and then they have to come onto the battlefield at home, and it is very difficult to adapt. This has been noted many times before. This is very concerning. This here is an article that is talking about the preparation for war in megacities. Every year, more and more of the world's population moves into cities. The number of megacities is growing exponentially. Both of these global patterns and their invaluable consequences for military operations are well documented. Yet we still don't have units that are even remotely prepared to operate in megacities if we want to find success on, I found this interesting, this term, urban battlefields. The U.S. Army will inevitably find itself fighting in the future. That needs to change. There's much in here. I'm obviously not going to read it all. All right, you're looking at the Chief of Staff, General Mark Milley. In the future, I can say with very high degrees of confidence, the American Army is probably going to be fighting in urban areas. We need to man, organize, train, and equip the force for operations in urban areas, highly dense urban areas, and that's a different construct. We are not organized like that right now. It is true in a way, but we have noted that there have been preparations which have been all this time been made. And you look at all of the military documents, I've covered them here before on the channel, which specifically state in the event that it is needed domestic disturbances, we can put the military on the streets. They've been preparing for that. And you have public admissions of that. I mean, all of these documents are available publicly. There's nothing classified about it or anything. And then you see consistently that they train for it. And they will take a mall, for instance, shut it down, run their operations where they are doing preparations regardless. And this happened here in Toronto as an example, where they ran these type of operations. Similar situation anyway. And they've done so in many cases in the US. It's been going on all this time. Look at this. NATO Urbanization Project. ACT is currently conducting a NATO urbanization conceptual study to examine the impact on NATO military operations of potential crisis situations in urban systems and the consequences of urbanization in 2035. You're looking at NATO now, going into different countries. NATO soldiers don't have that same, although they work for their individual countries, they don't have that same idea of, I want to help out my country, I wouldn't do this or that thing. That's why they use these global armies, whether it is NATO or whether they use their forces, grand forces of hired contractors. They don't want to use their own military to put them on the streets when need be. And there have been many cases in which they hire from the outside to do operations within the borders because, of course, they are more likely to do the dirty work. Why is urbanization study and experiment important? In 2008, the world as a whole passed the 50% threshold of individuals living in cities as opposed to the countryside. The Western world is already urbanized, 78% living in urban areas. Developing countries are experiencing a rapid rate of urbanization. And they're saying that should a natural disaster or crisis take place, they have to be able to react. And they're not prepared. They need to fill in the gaps on those training. They need to have the military essentially prepared for what could happen. If you have a natural disaster, you saw during the different hurricanes that have happened, just as an example, Katrina, others, where people took advantage. They started looting places and everything. So they would want to be able to put the military on the streets to restore order. I definitely see this as a tiptoe effect, a creeping effect on liberties of the people. Look at this. Has China been practicing preemptive missile strikes against U.S. bases? That's the topic of this article here. You've probably heard that China's military has developed a carrier-killer ballistic missile to threaten one of America's premier power projection tools, its unmatched fleet of aircraft carriers. And it goes on to talk about, potential warfare from either side. They talk about increasing tension with China's news organizations openly threatening war. And this goes from both sides. This article obviously has one side to it, but I have seen war drums been going off the charts recently, and it has been something that is very dangerous because with Syria in particular, when you see this, it is worrisome because you have presence there from Iran, you have presence there from Russia, and if Syria is invaded, you could easily, very quickly take this from a proxy war into a hot, direct war immediately. Very quickly. The same thing. If Russia gets pulled into something, what about China? Will they start to get into it? What about what's happening with the South China Sea constantly? There was an article I just read today talking about how, these jets are going over in this disputed waters. They're having a near miss all the time. You have the drone situation what happened recently. There's all these things that could, probably nothing will happen. That's the most likely scenario. But there's that little chance that somebody goes against their orders or maybe even taking orders, and all of a sudden somebody sets off one bomb and it just escalates rapidly. And that's what worries me. Someone flips a switch, either accidentally or they were told to, and all of a sudden things escalate to the top. That worries me. I won't get into any more of this article. I found this to be interesting. I wanted to bring it up. Argentina is so used to celebrating immigration as a cornerstone of society that as 19th century to govern is to populate remains in this use today. Now, they have instituted a new policy similar to the Trump administration of the immigration ban. There's now a decree curbing immigration to Argentina, with the government declaring that newcomers from poorer countries in Latin America bring crime. That's the suggestion, essentially now trying to make this happen just as the Trump administration has done so. I don't know what side you stand on, whatever it is, doesn't matter. All I'm saying is that this is occurring right now at this time. It's not just in the US, it is happening elsewhere. And in this case, Argentina. Now this page has decided to reload on me. IMF's ruthless truth tellers on Greece economy. That's according to Christine Lagarde. Essentially what we have here, I've lost my spot, but in this case, they're talking about Greece and how the fact that they agreed to a bailout in 2015, which of course I predicted in my original book, The Money GPS, but which doesn't take a genius to figure out. What they've done is said that they will give up their sovereignty. At the same time, they said, no, we don't want any IMF intrusion though. But the IMF is the one who controls it all. They are the rulers of the financial system. They decide what countries will get, what assets will be sold, and they are in fact a de facto government in many cases. Greece happens to be one of them. They're trying to push them aside, but that's not going to happen. Look how many assets Greece has had to sell off in recent years. Countless. Now you call it privatization, but it's really going to be a major loss. Look at all of these different institutions. You look at true assets. I believe it was airports. They sold off islands. They sold off all sorts of things. And it can't be gained back because they're in so much debt. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy that is occurring right now at this time. Greece happens to be really at the forefront, really the one that has been taking a beating. Fukushima, I just covered it, maybe it was yesterday's video or the day before, where you have this Fukushima robot that's going in and it's detected the highest levels of radiation. Even though they said that everything is under wraps, don't worry about it, we got this taken care of. Just so happens that, there's this massive fallout that is occurring. I mean, I'm laughing, but it's actually sick. Everything in that area is going crazy. The amount of radiation that has spread there is gone to bizarre levels. And what they'll do is just cover up the news. But I told you, they were able to go in there. They found the highest levels of radiation. Look at this. The robot goes in and actually stops working. Why? They admit because the level of radiation was too high. I mean, the robots are dying. This is insane. And then you try and go to send some humans in there for a little bit to test this or that. You can't have this happen. People are dying. The ecosystem surrounding Fukushima is dying rapidly and it's mutating. And then you have this sort of more, I want to call it indirect, but actually it is direct, spread of the radiation. A lot of people will say, and I've seen this before, you don't know anything. The half-life of these particular isotopes is not to be concerned about. Don't spread your fear-mongering, all this garbage. Some of what is spreading is going to stay around for a very long time. But even in the short time, on these shorter half-lives, what if they get into the fish? What if they get into the plants and the I think it was the dairy cows which were affected by this? It doesn't matter. Short or long, somebody is going to get affected by it, and it is polluting the entire earth. It is not being taken care of. It is not being addressed. It's being covered up. What about this? This is the low point of society. This is when you know all hell will break loose. This is the kind of thing, and let me just read it so we can get to it. Brawl breaks out over Nike's new LeBron sneakers. Over a pair of stupid shoes. People are beating the hell out of each other. People have died before over running shoes. Over a pair of slave-made running shoes, people are willing to fight, to beat each other's skulls in. What would happen? What do you think would happen if the store shelves ran empty, and then they went to the next store and it was empty too, and they started getting real hungry, and they had a wife and children at home and they were real hungry as well, and they needed some food? Well, then the crime begins, and that is exactly what is going to occur. This is what I warned about. This is actually on the back of my new book, where I say, let me holding the proof copy in my hand. Soon the earth will rumble under the heels of the angry mobs. That's what we are going to face. These are indications of the future. Be prepared for it. Now, this is a little funny edited picture of Leon Panetta. Remember Leon Panetta, and the reason I bring this up is because of the whole NATO thing. Also interesting because of Jeff Sessions just being chosen now. And what Leon Panetta said was very disturbing. Leon Panetta, to Jeff Sessions and to the rest of the crew, said, we will, if we are going to go to war with an international organization, NATO, then we will seek their permission, and if we wanted to tell Congress about it, those are things we need to discuss. That's a paraphrase. So basically what he said was, if we want to go to war, we're just going to do so. We are going to ask the permission of a supranational entity, and we will do so. We will, even though the Congress is the only one who can actually give the authority to go to war, they will do so regardless, and maybe, just maybe, they'll tell the Congress about it. So they may not even tell the Congress at all. This is the criminal intent. This is what leads me to believe that we will see military on the streets. You see it in many developing nations around the world, and it will eventually make it to your doorstep. If you found this video informative, please give me a thumbs up. Last but not least, if you found the video informative, I know you will find my book, The Money GPS, even more informative. Look, if you want to look through this book, go to Amazon. They have a look inside feature that will allow you to flip through the pages of the book and see if you like it.